New topic, okay, called Pythagoras Theorem. Now, I think it's probably going to be best, otherwise this video is going to become very long, that I talk it through to you all, I record it, and then perhaps when the lessons, we haven't got the questions, but maybe take some notes when you just play the recording back later. And as you know, the recording will be on Teams, and if you give me a bit of time, a bit later in the day, I'll upload it onto my YouTube. Okay. Now, what does Pythagoras' theorem allow us to do? It allows us to work out the length of a third side of a right-angled triangle if we already know two sides. Okay, so it's got to be a right-angled triangle, so one of the angles has to be 90 degrees, and providing we know two sides, we can work out the third side using this theorem. Now, a bit of terminology you're going to need to know. Okay, so obviously a right-angled triangle is 90 degrees, and when you're drawing one in questions, just sort of complete the square like we've done down in that bottom left-hand corner. That indicates that it is 90 degrees. Okay, and a new word for you probably, the diagonal side, so the longest side of the triangle, and it's always opposite the right angle, that's called the hypotenuse. Okay, so it'd be great if you can try and pronounce it right, but also if you can try and learn how to spell it, that will also be good too. Okay, so Pythagoras' theorem only works for right-angled triangles, and the length of that longest side is the hypotenuse. Now, today, all the practice questions when I'm recording, and also the worksheet, you're always going to be working out the hypotenuse. So the questions will be giving you the shorter two sides, and you'll be doing the maths to work out the hypotenuse. When we finish this, so next lesson, or maybe the lesson after that, depending on how long this takes, we'll start working out one of the shorter sides when we know the hypotenuse and the other shorter side. Now, if we were in class, we would do a nice cutting out exercise where we'd be cutting out some squares and proving this theory. But I don't think that's really practical while we're doing it remotely. So I think this time round, we're just going to have to launch straight in, and I will tell you what the Pythagoras' theory is. So let's imagine, I'll just wait until it clicks onto the appropriate slide. Here we go. So let's imagine we call the two shorter sides A and B. It doesn't matter which way round. And we're going to call the hypotenuse H. Then what Pythagoras' theorem tells us that if you take whatever A is and square it, and then add on whatever B is once it's squared, that then equals the hypotenuse squared. Okay? So it only works if you square them. So look at that little diagram on the right. If you imagine drawing a square off each of the sides, if you cut out that dark green square and cut out that purple square and then cut them up into bits and pieces with scissors, they would exactly fit on that red square. And we will do that in lessons if we have the time, but I just don't think it's practical to do that when we're doing it remotely, because it's quite fiddly and I need to sort of come around and help you a lot with it as you're cutting it out and sticking and what have you. So we'll save that for another time. So for today, please can you just write down this formulae, and I'm going to show you, we're going to model a few where we actually do this, and setting out of these is very important. So please do make sure that you keep your workings for this. So ideally, you're going to run off the worksheet that's on Teams already waiting for you and do your workings on that. Or you might just want to do your workings straight into your orange book. But I think today it's really important that you don't just sort of do it all in your head or all on your calculator and just upload your final answer onto Dr. Frost. The workings is really important for this topic, please. So let's go straight on to a question. So here we go. We've got our two shorter sides being 5 and 10. Our shorter sides are 5 and 10. Oops, sorry, I've just gone and touched something on my computer, my other computer, so I'm sort that out. There we go, good, I can see that. So our shorter sides are 5 and 10, and we're working out the hypotenuse. So each time, please start off by writing down the equation. So write it down every time. That will help you get to learn Pythagoras' theorem. So, next line of working, h squared equals. Now just try and set them out where you nicely line up your workings each time, please. So notice how the equal signs are under each other. Now A, it doesn't matter which way around it is, but I'm going to go and call it the 5A and the 10B. So A is 5, and we're going to square that. And B is 10, and we're going to square that. So that should be your second line of workings. Notice how it's repeatedly h squared. Now, 5 squared. Remember, 5 squared means 5 times 5. It does not mean 5 times 2. So 5 squared is 25. And 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. And that equals 125. 25 at 100 is 125. So we've squared the 5, we've squared the 10, and we've added them together. Now, that's what h squared equals. But we don't want h squared, we want h. Now, how do you undo squaring? What's the inverse operation to squaring? Well, if you remember from a few lessons back, we looked at it, it was square rooting. So square rooting undoes a squaring. So we are going to square root both sides. Okay, we are going to square root both sides. So on the left, we can now, for the first time, write down that it is h. So notice above that, it's been h squared, then h squared, then h squared. Now for the first time, it's going to be h on the left-hand side of the equal sign, and we're going to square root 125. So this is why you need your calculators, guys. So go and press the square root button, put 125 underneath it, press equals. Now you're probably going to get a surd coming up, something like 5 root 5. Now this is important. To turn that into a decimal, you're going to press the SD button on your calculator, which is probably just above the 2 blue buttons. So look for the SD button. That's turning a square root into a decimal. So when you press that, you get a big long decimal number, which is 11.1803, and it carries on for a while, forever. So just put in some dots to make the point that it's okay, just to make the point that it goes on for a while. So the dots haven't quite come through on your screen yet. So it's 11.1803 ... Now you will then read the question, okay, and it will tell you what you want to round it to. Now it may ask you to round it to 1 decimal place, or 2 decimal places, or 1 significant figure, or 2 significant figures. So you're going to have to use all your knowledge from the last few lessons on rounding just to get this final bit right. And remember how fussy Dr. Frost is. You need to get it exactly right to get the answer. So let's go and imagine that this question asked me to give the answer to 1 decimal place. It will tell me somewhere in the question. So remember, that means only 1 number after the decimal points. So my answer here would be 11.2. Okay? So h equals 11.2, and the units are centimetres. And that makes sense. H is a bit bigger than the 10. And you'd expect, remember, the hypotenuse is the longest side, so you've got to be getting an answer greater than the shorter sides, otherwise you've gone wrong there. So when you're working these out, I want you to be doing it, so basically there's 5 lines of workings. There's the formula. You then substitute the numbers in. That's where it says 5 squared plus 10 squared. You then work that out, you then square root, and then you round the answer. Okay? So, as I said, it may well be that you will need to go and play back this video before you can really properly have a go at the questions, okay? Okay, so I think what I will do when I finish the recording, to start with, I will go back and just leave this page that we're looking at now on the shared screen, so that as you start doing these questions, you can copy this page. I think that would be a good idea. Right, I think I will just model one more question. Okay, so I'll do this one quite quickly, and you just see if you can predict what I'm going to say. So, step 1, write out the formula. H squared equals A squared plus B squared. Step 2, substitute in the A and the B. It doesn't matter which way round. So 3 squared plus 10 squared. Step 3, go and work out what those are. So 3 3s are 9, 10 10s are 100. 9 add 100 is 109. Now that is what H squared is. I'm now going to square root both sides. So H equals the square root of 109. At that point, you get your calculator out, press the square root button, 109 equals, okay, and then SD button, and I get 10.4403, ... it goes on forever. Read the question. Let's pretend on this occasion it asks for the answer to 2 decimal places, so my final answer will be H equals 10.44 centimeters. So that's it, folks. Okay, I think a couple of examples is sufficient. So I'm going to stop the recording now. I suggest you probably start off by copying one of these down. Okay, copying one of these down before you start doing the questions. Obviously, if you're super confident, you're welcome to go straight into the questions. But I think